You won't believe what happened next. A world-famous hitmaker stepped to the mic at 39 and said, "All right. Here's what really happened. Not the glossy headlines, not the viral rumors. The real story. The kid who sang in smoky rooms before he could read. The teen who curled up on rooftops and in empty animal pens. The man who danced with fame and almost gambled it all away. If you've ever looked at Bruno Mars and thought, he was born lucky, this is the version that flips that idea on its head. Now, lean in, because once you hear how it started and what he finally confessed, it's going to change how you hear every song. He wasn't born on a stage, but it sure felt like it. In Honolulu, little Bruno Mars, a 4-year-old with a spark plug's energy, was the family ringer. While most kids argued over crayons, he was working. 2 shows a night in Waikīkī, 5 nights a week. People called him Little Elvis. Picture it. Tiny glitter suit, hips snapping like he'd been studying Elvis Presley in a past life. At 5, he lit up a football stadium's halftime show. At 6, he bounced onto a late-night talk stage and charmed the country. At 7, he strutted through a Hollywood set, a day player in a Vegas-themed comedy, joking years later that it was his first residency. Before his 10th birthday, nearly 1,000 shows. 1,000. That kind of grind hardwires your brain. No wonder years later when producers said Super Bowl rehearsal, he said it felt like recess. Then the lights went out. At 12, his parents split, the family act collapsed, and the stages disappeared. So did the paychecks. Bruno Mars, his dad, and his brother chased sleep wherever it might stick, inside a faded yellow Cadillac on rooftops that soaked up the day's heat, even in an abandoned bird enclosure where peacocks screamed all night like busted smoke alarms. Showers? Sneaking into hotel pools and pretending they were guests. Dinner? Whatever they could grab, often from a corner store. The electricity stayed off so long he learned guitar by moonlight because amps were a luxury. At school, thrift store outfits got laughs. He kept his head down, learned to laugh too, and turned the teasing into fuel. When the day ended, the real work began. Impersonating Michael Jackson at local gigs for $75 a night, money he stuffed into demo sessions and bus fare. At 18, he flew to Los Angeles with a new name and a stubborn plan. Childhood friends had called him Bruno, and a girl once joked he was so confident he had to be from Mars. He wrote that on his luggage tag, clutched 3 demo CDs, and landed with $600 to his name. That first year? A motel by the Strip where the neon buzzed louder than the air conditioner, a shared studio in Koreatown where 7 guys danced between mattresses and guitars, whatever kept the phone line alive. He faked his way into a DJ gig on a boulevard where engines drone all night. 2 nights later, they figured out he'd never touched a mixer. Fired. But the small check kept the lights on 1 more week and covered a pound of tacos at $1 each. Hustle isn't pretty, but it's sturdy. Here's the part they don't put in fairy tales. Getting signed isn't always a win. A major label slid a 3-page deal across the table, thinner than a diner breakfast menu, and wanted him to be the next Ricky Martin, to sing in Spanish he didn't write, to chase a lane that didn't feel like home. 9 months later, they dropped him. No single, no video, just thanks for your time. Imagine telling your family back home you made it, then calling back to say, never mind. Humiliating? Absolutely. Useful? Maybe even more. Because at that very moment, he crossed paths with songwriter Philip Lawrence, another talented guy freshly dropped, and they shook on a pact. Make records so undeniable, the industry would knock on the door they built themselves. They found a tiny Hollywood room, a producer named Ari Levine, with a few mics and a lot of patience. And they paid him in burritos when cash ran dry. They called their crew the Smeezingtons and turned the studio into a laboratory, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, they dissected hits like surgeons, verse lengths, drum pockets, how a chorus lifts, how a bridge explodes, then lands. Thousands of songs studied before they dared release one. His sister quietly slipped a demo to Mike Lynn, a gatekeeper with serious ears. At first, he almost tossed it, too chipmunky, too weird. Then a high-note hit at second 43, and he stopped cold. The meeting that followed didn't deliver a contract, but it delivered something priceless. Proof the right person could hear it. To keep the lights on, the trio sold a song they loved, Lost, to a legendary boy band brand for $20,000. It stung, but the rent got paid, and then the door cracked open. The team wrote the hook for a club banger that swallowed the planet, a dizzy carousel of synths and swagger that went #1 in a heartbeat. Then they laced the chorus for B.O.B.'s Nothing on You, another smash. Before Bruno Mars even stepped forward with his own single, songs he'd helped build had already moved tens of millions of downloads. When his voice finally took center stage, the world already recognized it. His first solo step was small by design, a short EP with a wink of a title, barely 4 tracks, barely 13 minutes. It didn't chart like a comet. It hovered just above the horizon, quietly introducing his voice, his pen, his feel. 5 months later, the bomb dropped. The debut album, Doo-Wops and Hooligans, felt familiar and brand new at once. No borrowed samples, just songs that stuck like honey. The budget was modest, the return was not. It stacked plaques around the world and camped on charts for years. The singles turned sidewalks into sing-alongs. Just the Way You Are slid onto the charts in August and climbed to the top in 8 weeks, then refused to leave for nearly a year, going Diamond Plus in the process. Grenade detonated next, racing up global charts, logging one of the biggest digital sales weeks on record at the time, even bouncing in and out of the top spot multiple times. Rarer than you'd think. Award shows noticed. Nominations piled up. He won Best Male Pop Vocal at 25, the youngest to grab that trophy since Stevie Wonder. A trade group that tracks worldwide sales crowned him the year's top artist. This wasn't hype. This was math. The next era arrived with a sting and a sneer. Locked Out of Heaven didn't sprint to #1. It jogged onto the scene at 34, and then, almost casually, climbed and climbed, until it planted a flag at the peak for 6 straight weeks. The groove cut across radio like a switchblade. Funk, rock, and police-tinged grit when the charts were drowning in EDM drops. With that, Bruno Mars became the first solo male since Bobby Vinton, back in the mid-60s, to score 4 #1s in his first 2 charting years. Let that sink in. Even Michael Jackson didn't do it that quickly. The album behind the single Unorthodox Jukebox was exactly what the title promised. Labels wanted a tidy dance record. He handed in 9 flavors. Disco sparkle on one track, sweaty rocker on the next, sun-baked reggae a few songs later. Somebody panicked and said radio might not touch it. He didn't blink. He even gave up a slice of future royalties to pay for live horns and vintage gear. Chaotic? Maybe. Magnetic? Definitely. It sold in the millions and snatched a Best Pop Vocal Album trophy. Engineers whispered that the session stacked more than 100 individual tracks per song. Maximalist with a purpose. Then a jam session with Mark Ronson turned into a monster. Uptown Funk began as a riff caught on a voice memo and ended up a skyscraper of a single, built by a small city of writers and players. Legal fights trailed behind it. Big hits attract big arguments. But the music bulldozed anyway. 14 weeks at #1. Dance floors around the world learned the horn stabs by muscle memory. At one point, an airline used it as a boarding jam, and flight attendants swore first-class drink orders spiked like a stock chart. It's a ridiculous statistic, exactly the kind a once-in-a-decade single attracts. And then The Flex, a short, punchy, no-skips album he named 24K Magic. 9 tracks, 33 minutes. Some execs raised an eyebrow. That's it? He nodded. That's the party. The old-school talkbox sang the welcome. The slow jam dripped silk. The pocket never wobbled. When awards night arrived in early 2018, the album swept the big three: album, record, song, and R&B set, pulling off a hat trick almost nobody expected. The fallout was immediate. Streams exploded, the slow jam went multi-platinum, and the tour, oh, the tour. More than 200 shows across 6 continents. Box offices reported numbers usually reserved for legacy giants. Millions of tickets, hundreds of millions in revenue. Local records crushed in cities that thought they'd seen it all. In one place, he sold more seats than a superstar had just 2 years before. Not bad for a short record. If you want to understand why those records sound the way they do, look under the hood. The intro's talkbox nods to late 80s synth romance. The lush balladry borrows the warmth of mid-90s slow jams. The finesse remix kicks in early 90s color. And yes, that's Cardi B repainting the verse in neon. It wasn't nostalgia for its own sake, it was curation. Building a museum where you can dance. Even the 9-track count has a nerdy reason. One of his favorite cassettes as a kid carried 9 songs on each side. He wanted that feeling. Flip it, no filler, just bangers. Right when the world expected him to cool off, he tossed out a slick hook for Gucci Mane on Wake Up in the Sky, a track also featuring Kodak Black. Legend says he recorded the chorus in half an hour, and the thing stuck like bubblegum to a sneaker. Maybe not a #1, but certified everywhere. Billions of streams and spins, the kind of, oh wait, that's Bruno Mars? Moment that keeps an artist's fingerprints across genres. Then he built a time machine with Anderson .Paak and called it Silk Sonic. One night in Las Vegas, the two of them announced it to a room full of people who thought they were getting just another show. The debut single, Leave the Door Open, felt like 1973, had been preserved in amber and cracked open with a modern groove. Strings swelled, harmonies floated, and the world said, yeah, that. It sprinted to the top and lingered there, then ransacked award night. Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Best R&B Performance, while Bootsy Collins sat like royalty blessing the whole affair. The album was cut like the old days. A room, a band, microphones, tape, no plugins doing the heavy lifting. Vinyl flew off shelves in week 1 like it was the 80s again. A handful of shows pulled in impossible per-night numbers. Some fans paid eye-watering sums for a single ticket and still left shouting, worth it. And then came the curveballs that keep a legend interesting. In the summer of 2024, a surprise duet with Lady Gaga landed, Die with a Smile. A black-and-white ballad shot like a short film. Rumor-hungry fans decoding flashed Morse code in the video, as if they'd stumbled on a treasure map. The song promptly owned the charts for weeks on end, and the publishing math got silly. Think, almost 1 million a day at peak? Silly. At a big award show in early 2025, the two of them performed it with a choir that sounded like sunlight, and Bruno Mars held a single note for so long people started timing it on their phones. The clip went everywhere overnight. The Inside Baseball story says he nailed the final take in one go at 4 in the morning and left the sound of shattering glass in the track because the imperfection felt honest. Apocryphal? Maybe? Perfect? Absolutely. Not long after, the pop universe collided again. Rosé from BLACKPINK teased a 9-second guitar lick on her feed, and the internet lost its mind. The duet dropped, debuting near the top of the chart, and the video's first-day view count smashed records. Months later, she played to a packed stadium in Los Angeles. Mid-show, the lights died, the crowd screamed, and when they rose, Bruno Mars stood there smiling like he'd just photobombed the moon. They performed together, confetti fell by the ton, and streaming numbers jumped so fast you could almost hear the servers wheeze. Fans begged for the title's meaning. He winked and said it stood for After Party Tango, a nod to a night in Buenos Aires when they danced until sunrise. Maybe there's a video. Maybe it lives on a locked phone. The mystique doesn't hurt, so the next time Just the Way You Are floats out of a cafe, hear the 12-year-old trying not to cry. When Grenade punches your chest, hear the guy who got dropped and still kept dialing. When Locked Out of Heaven makes your shoulders roll, hear the hours the Smeezingtons stood over waveforms like watchmakers. When Uptown Funk hijacks your feet, hear the voice memo that started it all. When 24K Magic kicks the door, hear the meeting where someone said, 9 tracks? And he said, trust me. When Silk Sonic slides in, hear the tape hiss, actual tape hiss, reminding you that warmth is earned. And when you catch him smiling through a rumor, remember the trick he learned long ago. Turn pain into performance. It's the oldest magic we have. Now, let me land this plane with you. We started with a headline that begged for scandal and ended with something better: context. Bruno Mars wasn't an overnight success. He was a nightly success. Nights on stages he didn't choose, nights on roofs he didn't want, nights in studios nobody believed in yet. He loved, he lost, he gambled on songs, on love, on luck. And when the chips fell wrong, he picked them up and danced anyway. That's not just pop stardom. That's survival with a backbeat. If this story hit you, if it made you hear the music differently, or reminded you that talent is just grit with a melody, do me a favor. Drop a comment with the song that soundtracked your hardest season. Share this with someone who thinks they're out of time to start. And if you want more true stories told straight, no fluff, all heart, tap that like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. We've got more legends to unmask, more myths to break, and more late-night honesty to share. See you in the next chapter.